In many cases, graduate fellows do the exact same work as graduate assistants, who the university already recognizes as being unionized employees. Fellows do the same research, teach the same classes, and the only difference between these two classes of workers, right, is the recognition that the university bestows upon graduate assistants. The state legislature recognizes the similarity between these two classes of workers. That is why they passed legislation in the 2024 legislative session explicitly including these workers in our bargaining unit. That was 19 months ago at this point, and the university, and since then, our union has tried to negotiate with the university on this issue. The university has plugged its ears and ignored this law, relying on bad faith bargaining techniques and stall tactics until now, when the case of fellows inclusion is set to go before the Bureau of Mediation Services. To be extraordinarily clear, the law is very frank here, right? Just this week, State Senators McEwen and Fate, along with 17 other legislators, penned a letter to the university explicitly affirming that the intent of these legislative reforms signed in 2024 were to include fellows in our bargaining unit. They made clear that this is settled law and called on the university to settle this case rather than waste additional taxpayer dollars litigating it. So where are we now? We have an extremely reasonable settlement offer on the table with the university. The university accepting it would end this process immediately. If the university does not accept our offer, both parties will be dragged into a protracted and extremely expensive set of hearings at the BMS. The university will spend hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars on legal fees that is paid for by taxpayers here in the state of Minnesota. This is money which can certainly be put to better use, given that the 2025-2026 operating budget, which was passed by the Board of Regents, cut academic programs by 7% and levied the largest tuition increase seen by the University of Minnesota in 14 years. But it does not have to be this way. We won't have to go through this lengthy hearing process if the U accepts our settlement offer. And quite frankly, they should. It is good for grad workers, it is good for the university, and it's good for Minnesotan taxpayers. Now, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Robin Wansley's legislative policy aide, Celeste Robinson, to discuss a newly introduced resolution that will be put before the City Council. Thanks.
Good morning. Thank you so much for inviting me here today. My name is Celeste Robinson, and I'm a policy aide for City Council member Robin Wansley. Councilmember Wansley represents Ward 2 on the Minneapolis City Council, which includes the majority of the University of Minnesota. She's also the minority leader of the City Council for the Democratic Socialist council members. She's also a former University of Minnesota grad student herself and a strong supporter of the University of Minnesota Graduate Labor Union. Next week, Councilmember Wansley will be bringing forward a resolution for the City Council to consider that would establish an official city position of support for the labor rights of graduate fellows and trainees at the University of Minnesota, and would urge the University of Minnesota to immediately settle the ongoing dispute with GLU UE 1005 by recognizing graduate fellows and trainees as public employees in the bargaining unit. The University of Minnesota is a major employer in Ward 2. It's a major part of the Ward 2 community, and it's a major part of our city. It is incredibly disappointing to see the University of Minnesota spend taxpayer money trying to union bust instead of complying with the new PELRA policy and recognizing the entire bargaining unit, including graduate fellows and trainees. We oppose any attempts by employers, lobbyists, or legislators to weaken the labor rights of any workers, including graduate fellows and trainees at the University of Minnesota. It's not too late for the U to do the right thing and settle the dispute immediately by recognizing all graduate fellows and trainees as members of the bargaining unit immediately. So Councilmember Wansley is really looking forward to bringing this resolution to the floor next week. It will go to committee on the 24th and to the council for final approval on the 26th. And we are hoping that there can be a unanimous vote by the council standing in solidarity with every single graduate student and graduate worker, including graduate fellows and trainees at the University of Minnesota. Solidarity, thank you.
Thank you, Celeste, and Councilmember Wansley as well. I am now going to read a statement from Senator McEwen from Duluth, chair of the Senate Labor Committee as well, which was sent to us from Senator McEwen's office. Thank you all for showing up in support of graduate fellows and trainees at the University of Minnesota. In a strong union state like Minnesota, it is deeply troubling to hear that the university administration has declined to acknowledge the labor that the fellows contribute to the university and has denied them their labor rights for over 19 months. Fellows work on the same projects, in the same workplaces, assume the same job duties, and report to the same supervisors as their research assistant counterparts. These workers are the foundation of the research and education that makes the University of Minnesota a top-tier institution. In 2024, I was proud to join the workers from across the university system to ensure that they have the same right to join a union as anyone else. Those reforms made it abundantly clear that graduate fellows and trainees have the right to organize with the graduate assistant unit, along with all rights and protections that Minnesota law provides employees. Today, I call on the University of Minnesota administration to stop wasting its resources and immediately settle this issue by recognizing graduate school fellows and trainees as public employees and members of the graduate assistant unit. I urge them to meet these workers at the bargaining table to negotiate a fair contract that benefits everyone, students, workers, and the university alike. Every worker deserves a union. When workers have strong union representation, we are all better off for it. I stand in wholehearted solidarity with the graduate fellows and trainees in their efforts to exercise their fundamental right to join a union. Thank you for your advocacy. Keep up the good fight. We've got your back every step of the way. That was from Senator McEwen, chair of the Senate Labor Committee. Now I'm going to introduce John Hutchinson. He's the receiver of the prestigious National Research Traineeship and General Secretary of GLU. Thanks.
Thank you. My name is John Hutchinson. I'm a PhD student in the Department of Chemical Engineering and Materials Science at the University of Minnesota. I also have the privilege of serving as the General Secretary of GLU UE Local 1105, which represents over 4,000 graduate workers here in Minneapolis, in St. Paul, and in Duluth. I'm also a graduate trainee. I, like many of the other graduate workers here at the University of Minnesota, work on the cutting edge of research. For me, that involves running experiments in the lab, writing code to train machine learning models to predict future results, and then writing and publishing papers. Next week, I'm even traveling to the National Science Foundation's Research Traineeship Annual Meeting, where I'll be sharing how the $3 million the NSF has put forward to the University of Minnesota for my program has led to increased research output. Yet in spite of all of this, the University of Minnesota maintains that I do not work here and that I'm not entitled to the protections guaranteed in our collective bargaining agreement. I'm not the only one who finds myself in this situation. Across the U, there are hundreds of fellows and trainees who provide critical labor to make the U function and drive the cutting-edge research found across the institution. Yet the University of Minnesota maintains that no fellow does work. This refusal does real harm to people across the university. Fellows are denied access to protections against harassment, protections against overwork, and the rest of the protections guaranteed in our contract. A graduate worker can have all of these protections, yet find it suddenly ripped away by the whims of the university, simply by moving them to a fellowship. The state legislature saw this as something that needed to be changed. In 2024, they amended Statute 179A to explicitly include graduate fellows and trainees as part of the bargaining unit that covers all graduate workers at the U. Yet since then, the U has categorically refused to recognize any fellow or trainee as part of this bargaining unit. In October of 2024, the university signed an agreement to meet with our union in good faith to find a path to determine which fellows and trainees fall within the bargaining unit. The University of Minnesota has failed to live up to that agreement. During our bargaining and mediation sessions, our union put forward numerous approaches to seek compromise and find a path forward. The U has categorically rejected every single one. During that time, they made a single proposal, simply returning one of our proposals to us with every line crossed out, and instead proposing that no fellows or trainees are in the bargaining unit. Our attempts to mediate ended when the University of Minnesota's bargaining team simply walked out, having never wavered from the stance that no fellows do work at the University of Minnesota. Our union has, once again, put forward an attempt to compromise with the university. The offer currently on the table meets the needs of graduate workers while making compromises to meet the university's position in the middle. The university has yet to even acknowledge this proposal. Rather, they are forcing us to go through an expensive and time-consuming hearing process at the Bureau of Mediation Services. This is especially egregious considering that the University of Minnesota recently had to raise tuition, cut the budgets of many academic units, and ask the state to provide it with even more taxpayer funding. Clearly, the administration and Board of Regents of the University of Minnesota believe it is a better use of their funds to illegally deprive workers of their rights than it is to fulfill the core mission of the university, that of research and teaching. The U's blatant disregard for the law is not going unnoticed. I want to thank Councilwoman Wansley for her efforts in putting a resolution about this forward to the Minneapolis City Council. I'd like to thank the many state legislators who have signed on to our letter condemning the action of the University of Minnesota, which is being shared today. Our community sees this clearly. The University of Minnesota is not above the law, yet their blatant and willing refusal to disregard the law is harming the people they claim to care about. We stand here today to call upon the University of Minnesota to comply with the law, to accept a reasonable settlement that compromises with the university's position rather than frivolously spending money on further harm to university fellows and trainees. Thank you all.
And finally, I'd like to call up Anna Martin Boyle, Graduate Fellow in the Department of Computer Science at the University of Minnesota and Campus Chief Steward of GLU 1105. Thanks.
Thank you all for being here with us today. My name is Anna. I'm a PhD candidate in computer science, and I have served as a steward for the Graduate Labor Union for over a year. I now represent over 4,000 graduate workers, the people who provide essential teaching support and execute the research mission of the university as the chief steward of GLU Local 1105. My job is to help graduate workers when something goes wrong at work. When graduate workers are overworked, harassed and bullied by their supervisors, forced to work in unsafe conditions, denied leave, given unfair discipline, or discriminated against, I and all of our stewards are legally entitled to represent them and fight on their behalf. But the university has decided that fellows don't get that support. If a supervisor forces a fellow to work 60-hour weeks, the university bars me from filing a workload grievance on the worker's behalf. If a department denies a fellow parental or bereavement leave or sick time to care for a child, the university has made sure there is no formal recourse. If the university ignores a fellow's request for a reasonable accommodation they need to do their job, the university will not allow me to advocate for them. If a fellow is facing disciplinary action and wants a union representative in the room, I am barred from entering. If a supervisor is threatening an international fellow with visa consequences, I can't step in as their steward. If a fellow is sexually harassed in the workplace, I cannot sit with them and represent them through Title IX proceedings. To be clear, I'm not talking about people who are doing something different from the rest of the graduate assistants. These are hundreds of people working in the same labs, doing the same research, and reporting to the same advisors as the graduate workers I can help. The only difference is where their funding comes from. A grad worker can have full protections one semester, just cause discipline, grievance rights, workload limits, protections against harassment and retaliation, health insurance, paid sick leave, personal days, parental leave, and more, and then have all of it ripped away the next semester because the university moved them to a fellowship. So to be clear, this issue affects a lot more than just 800 or so fellows, because all 4,000 plus workers in our unit can be moved to a fellowship if the department decides that's the best way to fund them. And I know this to be true because it is happening to me right now. My advisor wanted to put me on a research assistantship this semester, which would come with union protections, but instead my department put me on a patchwork of fellowships without explanation. So I myself do not currently have formal protections, except for the thousands of graduate workers at my back who will not let the university get away with this. And the university's justification for all of this is that fellows don't do work, that the research they produce is solely for their own education and contributes nothing to the university's research mission. But this is research that the university actively recruits for, takes credit for, and reports as institutional output. They claim credit for work that they do not even acknowledge constitutes labor. We know that the legislature saw this problem and passed a law to fix it in 2024. The university has refused to follow that law. I want people to understand how discouraging that is. Minnesota is supposed to be a pro-labor state, and people across the country look at Minnesota and see a state that protects its workers. I know this to be true because I recently had a conversation with a friend of mine out of state, and when I described this issue, when he found out that the state's second largest public employer is openly defying state labor law so that they can deny graduate workers basic protections, he expressed shock and disappointment that this kind of thing could happen here. It damages our reputation and is frankly shocking. We have a reasonable settlement offer on the table right now, but the university is ignoring it. Instead, they are spending tuition and taxpayer dollars on a legal fight to prevent their own workers from having basic protections. I became a steward because I believe that every worker deserves someone in their corner. Right now, I cannot be that person for hundreds of fellows at this university. This is a choice that the administration is making that endangers all graduate workers, and they must answer for it. Thanks.
Thank you all so much for coming. I and a few other GLU folks will be able to stick around and answer some questions if you would like to.